So a lot of times when I go to a new restaurant to test it out, especially if I'm out of town, I will ask the question from the host or hostess, the waiter or waitress that is there. I'll ask them, okay, if I never make it back here again, what is the one thing that I should try? What's the one thing that I should eat? What's the house specialty, if you will? And I've tried a lot of good food as a result of that. Well, the icebreaker question today is kind of along those lines, but it's diving into deep discussions right off the bat. The question is, do you talk to people about God? And if you do talk to people about God, what's the most important thing that you try to weave into the conversation? What is the one thing, the one most important thing that you would want them to know about God if you brought up the conversation, or even if they brought up the conversation? What would be the one thing that you would want them to know about God? Talk about that. That'll get you started for this evening or for today. And when you're ready to dive into the scriptures, you can press play. So I asked the priority question because what we're starting to do now is to dive into a specific set of books in the New Testament that have the title epistles. Now, epistles are nothing more than letters, so I'm just going to call them letters. We're going to be looking at letters that are written by individuals to other individuals or groups of people. And we're starting out with a letter that is written by the Apostle Paul to a church in Corinth. This is a group of people who believe that Jesus is the Christ, but it's a group of people that Paul has never met. In fact, they didn't learn the good news of the gospel from Paul. They learned it from a man named Epaphras, which we're going to get into a little bit later on in the letter. If you have your own Bible, and I highly encourage you to get your own Bible as we start to go through this series, because it'll be easy to follow along, and you can take notes in the margins of your own Bible and highlight and underline and so forth in your own Bible. And then you have it, and it's yours, and you can take it home. It's all together right there in the Bible. Anyway, we're diving into the book of Colossians, and what you're going to see is that right off the bat, Paul opens up with a greeting, in introducing himself to them, and he opens up with an encouragement where he talks to them about what is the most important thing for him to mention to them about what it is that they're going to be talking about, which is God. And so his way of introducing himself is to say that he is sent by Jesus Christ, and it's through the will of God that he is sent by Jesus. And so he's an apostle, which is a sent one. And then he goes on to encourage them about their faith in Jesus and their love for one another. So read that little introduction and then talk about that. Why do you think Paul's first priority is to encourage them in their faith in Jesus and their love for one another? Talk about that if you read that passage, and we'll continue after you have a chance to talk about that for a minute. So what we're going to find as we go through this section is that Paul's main priority, his first priority, is to talk to the Colossians about the good news of the gospel. And we're going to look at this passage from that standpoint, but we're going to do that in a minute. We're going to do that after we go past a little side piece here that Paul does as a part of his encouragement to the church in Colossae. his encouragement to them is that he is praying for them, that the whole group with Paul is praying for them, and that they are continually praying for them. You see, a lot of times we think of prayer nowadays as kind of a minor thing, an afterthought, something that we do when we can't do anything else. We might as well pray. But prayer was not that kind of a mindset for Paul, and it shouldn't be for us. Prayer is the most powerful thing that we can do, and the greatest gift that we can give someone. When we go to God in prayer, we invite God to act. And when we go to God in prayer on behalf of another person, we are inviting God to act in their lives, to make God's self known to them, even when we can't be there, even when we can't talk to Him face to face. In our age of electronics, that's a little bit harder to think of. But for Paul's day, writing a letter and getting a message to a person was incredibly difficult and very time consuming. But when he prays, he's asking God, who is already there with that other person, with those other people in Colossae, he's asking God to act in their lives. Now, Paul tells them what he's praying for. And essentially what he's doing is he's praying for them to grow in maturity, which we talked about at the end of last series. How important that is that we grow in our maturity, in our knowledge of God, in our faith in God, and being strengthened by the Holy Spirit, and living out God's design and desire for our lives. Well, Paul prays for these things for the church in Colossae. And so what I want you to do is to read this section where it's talking about his prayer and go through the details there. What did Paul ask God to give the Colossians? What did Paul pray for the people in Colossae? And why do you think it is so important that not only did he pray for those things, but he communicated to them that these are the things he's praying for on their behalf? Read that, talk about that, and we will continue when you're done discussing that. Okay, for our last segment here, we're going to talk about the most important thing that Paul had to talk about to the church in Colossae, and that was the good news of the gospel. Now, in order to see that that is the most important thing he's talking about, you have to kind of back up in this passage a little bit and look at it as with kind of a bird's eye view, a little bit more of an overview. So what I did is I took the entire passage from verse 1 through 23, and I kind of bullet point outlined it for you so that you could see how he is developing this picture of the good news of the gospel. It all centers around Jesus and Jesus providing reconciliation for us with God, that we are able to draw near to God even if we've been far away from God or in rebellion against God. God will forgive us, God will reconcile with us, God will walk with us, and it's all because of Jesus. Now, Paul lays that out in this beginning section of Colossians, and so I want to encourage you to read the outline there and really even take a moment to read that passage from your own Bible once you've looked at the outline. So look at the outline and then read the passage, read the from 1 through 23 as an overview all the way through, and then talk about that. Does this outline and this passage from Colossians that Paul wrote, does it help you to better understand the meaning of good news or the meaning of gospel? And how does that help you to grow in your knowledge and your understanding of that term, what that means? When you're done reading that and talking about that, then pray for one another. Pray the kind of prayer that Paul prayed for the Colossians. Pray that we will be strengthened in the Spirit of Christ. Pray that we will grow in the knowledge of Christ, and pray that we will bear good fruit, that our words and our actions will more and more reflect Christ in everything that we say and we do. Know that I'm praying for you as well, praying this kind of a prayer for all of us, that we will grow in our walk together with God. God bless.